How can we keep an audience riveted on every word that we're saying for a long period of time? Is it possible? Is it probable? Is it likely? We know the answer to that is probably no. Alvin Toffler, way back in 1970, published a book called Future Shock. And he told us in that book, amongst other things, that we would have information overload in the years ahead. And this has happened. We have such a plethora of options as far as learning, looking, going places on the internet. That didn't exist even in Toffler's time, but he predicted it. And he predicted also attention times would get shorter. At least, I believe he would have at least inferred this. And it is certainly the case. Attention deficit disorder. When I was a kid, that expression didn't even exist, and probably didn't exist until maybe about 30 years ago, and then suddenly, attention deficit disorder. Everybody seems to be suffering from it. Children, men, not so much women. They're seem to be able to focus longer than men. Well, that's what we're told. But to get back to public speaking, how do we get an audience to focus on what we've got to say all the way through our presentation? There is an answer, and that answer is to tell them a story, a long story, interesting from the very beginning right through to the end. How do I know this to be the case? I've been presenting to audiences, telling them stories, entertaining stories now, since the 1980s. Every time I do this, I've never had anyone, to my knowledge, walk out, unless they've told me in advance that they might have to do so, or pick up a telephone and start using it in my meetings, in my storytelling presentations. Not to my knowledge. I could be wrong, I could have missed something. But in the 900 odd presentations that I've given to audiences, where I simply tell a short story perhaps, and then maybe one long story, which might go from 30 minutes to 50 minutes, and they are riveted all the way through. Storytelling, that's what gets them to listen. Why? You are, as a speaker, you're just the catalyst. You're just the person who puts the words forward and the story. They create it. They create it in their minds, their movies. It's movies in their minds. And while they are creating, while they're so fascinated with what you've got to say in the story, and they keep creating, it's a different ballgame. They don't suddenly want to tune out. They want to listen to the story right to the end. Now, if you're a public speaker, you're a motivational speaker, it might be a little bit more difficult. And if you're an educational speaker, perhaps even more difficult again. But if you want to keep them occupied all the way through, from beginning to end, tell nothing but stories. Nothing but stories. Storytelling. It's been around for 100,000 years at least. It's only since the advent of radio, then later TV, and now the internet, that it's starting to lose some of its appeal because of this attention deficit disorder. I was brought up in a classroom where on a Friday afternoon the teacher would read us a story as a treat. Everybody looked forward to that. Everybody looked forward to listening to the teacher who could tell that story, read it in such a way that it would put pictures in our minds, keep us riveted, one long book after another, each segment ending on a high note or cliffhanger so that next time we wanted to come back and listen again. Storytelling. That's what keeps an audience riveted. Learn how to tell stories, learn how to tell them well. It's where the power of the spoken word lies.